Can you name the importance of at least one of the nations in the ASEAN, and what type of agreement we have with at least one of those nations? And how many nations are in ASEAN, by the way?
I couldn't tell you the exact amount of nations in that, but I know we have allies in South Korea and Japan and in AUKUS with Australia, trying to work on submarines with them.
Mr. Hegseth, none of those countries are in ASEAN.
Across.
None of those 3 countries that you've mentioned are in ASEAN. I suggest you do a little homework before you prepare for these types of negotiations. Listen, how can we ask these warriors to train and perform the absolute highest standards when you are asking us to lower the standards to make you the Secretary of Defense simply because you are buddies with our president-elect? And by the way, he has filed for bankruptcy 6 times. I'm not quite sure he's the kind of CEO you want to refer to as a successful businessman.
There is a moment in this hearing that most people scrolled past, and if you missed it, you missed the whole picture. A sitting U.S. Senator, a combat veteran who lost both her legs in a helicopter crash in Iraq, stood up and asked the man who wanted to run the entire American military a few basic questions. Not trick questions, not political traps, basic foundational questions that any Secretary of Defense should be able to answer in their sleep. He could not answer them. And that man, Pete Hegseth, a Fox News host with no senior government experience, no audit history, no background in international security agreements, is now in charge of the most powerful military on earth. But here is what this video is really about. This is not just a story about a confirmation hearing from a year ago. This connects directly to right now, to a war that is happening, to soldiers who are dying, to generals being fired in the middle of active combat, and to a 19-year-old son sitting safely at home while other people's children are being sent into harm's way. Let's walk through all of it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And also, Secretary Mattis had to have this waiver as well. Mr. Hegseth, this hearing is about whether you are qualified to be Secretary of Defense, and one of the qualifications, to answer my colleague's question, is to actually win the votes of every member of this committee and to be confirmed by the United States Senate. And you need to convince us that you're worthy of that vote, because the people of the state of Illinois voted for me to be their senator so that I could cast that vote when it comes to picking who is going to be the next Secretary of Defense. This hearing now seems to be a hearing about whether or not women are qualified to serve in combat, and not about whether or not you are qualified to be Secretary of Defense. And let me just say that the American people need a SecDef who's ready to lead on day one. You are not that person. Our adversaries watch closely during times of transition, and any sense that the Department of Defense that keeps us safe is being steered by someone who's wholly unprepared for the job puts America at risk, and I am not willing to do that. With that in mind, Mr. Hegseth, I want you to try to explain to the American people, this committee, who have to vote for you, and to our troops who are deployed around the world, why you are qualified to lead the Department of Defense. We already know that you've only led as large as a 200-person organization. We already know that you so badly mangled a budget that after you left, they had to bring in a forensic accountant to figure out what went wrong, and that the largest budget you ever managed was about $18 billion. You know, that is about 51,560 times lower than the Department of Defense budget of $825 billion. $16 million is 51,568 times smaller than the defense budget. Please describe to me, Mr. Hegseth, you talk about DOD passing an audit. Please describe to me a time or an organization when that you led underwent an audit, because you say you're going to hire smarter people than you to run this audit. I'm not asking you to be an accountant. I want you to be able to tell me what kind of guidance will be given to those employees, what will happen if, whether or not you pass that audit. Have you led an audit of any organization, yes or no? I don't want a long answer, yes or no. Have you led an audit of any organization of which you were in charge?
Senator, in both of the organizations I ran, we were always completely fiscally responsible.
Yes or no, did you lead an audit?
And the way
yes
my
or no, did you lead an audit?
Stated,
yes or no?
What
are you afraid of? You can't answer this question. Yes or no, did you lead an audit? Do you not know this answer?
Senator, every part of my leadership of these organizations has been misrepresented.
I will take that as a no. What were the findings? So there were no findings because you've never led an audit. What guidance did you give the auditors? None, because you've never led an audit. Nobody expects you to be an accountant, Mr. Hegseth. What we expect is for you to understand the complexity of this Pentagon budget process that is absolutely necessary to outfit our warfighters. Look, the Secretary of Defense is required to make quick decisions every single day with high-level information that's being provided for them. A Secretary of Defense has to have breadth and depth of knowledge. Right now, I am concerned that you have neither. Mr. Hegseth, what is the highest level of international negotiations that you have engaged in, that you have led in? Because the Secretary of Defense does lead international security negotiations. There are three main ones that the Secretary of Defense leads and signs. Can you name at least one of them?
Could you repeat the question, Senator?
Sure. What is the highest level of international security agreement that you have led? And can you name some that the Secretary of Defense would lead? There's three main ones. Do you know?
I have not been involved in international security arrangements because I have not been in government other than serving in the military. So my job has been to
no. The answer is no. Can you name one of the three main ones that the Secretary of Defense
signs? You're talking about defense arrangements. I mean, NATO might be one that you're referring to.
Status of Forces Agreement would be one of them.
Status of Forces Agreement. I've been a part of teaching about Status of Forces Agreements.
But you don't remember to mention it? You're not qualified, Mr. Hegseth. You're not qualified. You talk about repairing our defense industrial complex. You're not qualified to that. You could do acquisition and cross-servicing agreements, which essentially are security agreements. You can't even mention that. You've done none of those. You talked about the Indo-Pacific a little bit, and I'm glad that you mentioned it. Can you name the importance of at least one of the nations in the ASEAN, and what type of agreement we have with at least one of those nations? And how many nations are in ASEAN, by the way?
I couldn't tell you the exact amount of nations in that, but I know we have allies in South Korea and Japan and in AUKUS with Australia, trying to work on submarines with them.
Mr. Hegseth, none of those countries are in ASEAN.
Across.
None of those three countries that you've mentioned are in ASEAN. I suggest you do a little homework before you prepare for these types of negotiations. Listen, Mr. Hegseth, we ask our troops to go into harm's way all the time. We ask them to go into harm's way. And this behind me is a copy of the Soldier's Creed, a copy that usually hangs over my desk here in the Senate, and you should be familiar with it. It's the same copy that hung over my desk at Walter Reed every single day that I woke up and fought my way back because I wanted to go back and serve next to my buddies who'd saved my life. This same copy, these words are repeated over and over and over again. And let me read out two things to you, two sentences. I will always place the mission first, and I am disciplined, physically and mentally tough, trained and proficient in my warrior task. Mr. Hegseth, our troops follow these words every single day, and they man up and they pack their rucksacks and they go to war. And they deserve a leader who can lead them, not a leader who wants to lower the standards for himself or raising the standards for other people. And by the way, our troops already meet the standards. We ask troops to man that ship, fight that fire, fly that helicopter until their very last breath. And they do that every single day. They cannot be led by someone who's not competent to do the job. How can we ask these warriors to train and perform the absolute highest standards when you are asking us to lower the standards to make you the Secretary of Defense simply because you are buddies with our president-elect? And by the way, he has filed for bankruptcy 6 times. I'm not quite sure he's the kind of CEO you want to refer to as a successful businessman. Let me make it clear. You can't seem to grasp that there is no U.S. military as we know it without the incredible women that we serve. Women who've earned their place in their units. You have not earned your place as Secretary of Defense. You say you care about keeping our armed forces strong and that you like that our armed forces are meritocracy, then let's not lower the standards for you. You, sir, are a no-go at this station.
Watch what just happened there. Senator Duckworth, who literally bled for this country, asked Hegseth 3 things. Can you describe the audit findings from your time leading a defense organization? He could not. He had never led one. Can you name at least one of the 3 main international security agreements that a Secretary of Defense is responsible for? He could not. He guessed. He mentioned status of forces agreements only after being prompted. He missed the 3rd one entirely, which is acquisition and cross-servicing agreements, the framework that allows U.S. forces to operate across allied nations. Can you name at least one country in ASEAN and describe our relationship with them? He named South Korea, Japan, and Australia None of those countries are in ASEAN. In simple terms, this means the man who is being nominated to lead 3 million military personnel, to manage an $850 billion budget, and to oversee active U.S. military presence across dozens of countries could not pass a basic geography and policy quiz. Now, here is where it gets serious. According to reporting from NPR, Hegseth would go on to become the least experienced Secretary of Defense since the position was created in 1947. Experts pointed out that even going back to George Washington's first Secretary of War, every single person who held this job came from a senior position in politics, industry, or the military. Hegseth had run 2 small veterans advocacy groups before becoming a weekend host on Fox News, but the Senate confirmed him anyway. The vote was 50-50. Vice President J.D. Vance had to break the tie. That is how close it was. Even 3 Republican senators, Mitch McConnell, Susan Collins, and Lisa Murkowski, voted no. And this is exactly the kind of question Senator Duckworth was raising. Not just, is this man qualified today, but what happens when this man is in charge during a real crisis? We now have the answer. Right now, as of this week, the United States is in an active war with Iran. It is called Operation Epic Fury. It began on the 28th of February, 2026, when the U.S. and Israel launched strikes on Iranian nuclear facilities. According to reporting from PBS and Wikipedia, those strikes killed Iran's supreme leader Ayatollah Khamenei on the first day. Iran has since retaliated with hundreds of drones and missiles targeting Israel, U.S. military bases across the Gulf, oil tankers, and civilian infrastructure. As of this week, 13 American service members have been killed and 365 have been wounded in action. Trump launched this war without congressional approval. According to PolitiFact and PBS, multiple members of Congress, both Democrats and even some Republicans, called it unconstitutional. The War Powers Resolution introduced in the Senate was defeated. The war started anyway. Now think about what Senator Duckworth said in that hearing. She asked Hegseth about international security negotiations. She asked about ASEAN. She asked about agreements that govern how the U.S. operates with its allies in the Pacific and the Gulf. Those are not academic questions anymore. Right now, the U.S. is asking countries across the Middle East to cooperate, to allow use of their bases, to help manage the Strait of Hormuz, and to support ongoing operations. And the man responsible for those negotiations is the same man who could not name a single ASEAN country. But it gets more concerning from there. This week, in the middle of active combat, Hegseth fired the Army Chief of Staff, General Randy George, and 2 other senior generals. According to reporting from CNN, Military.com, and Time Magazine, General George found out through a phone call while he was in a meeting. He was given no public explanation. He was told to retire immediately. The 2 others fired alongside him were the commander of Army Transformation and Training Command and the Army's chief of chaplains. One unnamed U.S. official told Axios, and this is a direct quote in spirit, here is a 4-star general who is actively working to get equipment and people into theater to protect U.S. forces, and you fire him in the middle of a war? A political scientist at MIT put it plainly. Firing senior officers for cause is one thing. Firing them repeatedly on this scale with no explanation is unprecedented in U.S. history. Now connect this to something else. Earlier in his tenure, Hegseth ordered the Pentagon to cut 8% of its budget, around $50 billion, from programs he called wasteful. That included climate readiness programs, diversity initiatives, and what he described as bureaucratic fat. According to NPR and the Air and Space Forces magazine, this was one of the single largest proposed budget cuts since sequestration in 2013. Defense officials warned that cuts of this kind historically reduce training hours, cut non-commissioned officers, and hurt readiness. And the Pentagon, under Hegseth's watch, also spent $93.4 billion in September 2025 alone, a single month, in what budget watchdogs called a historic use it or lose it spending spree. That spending included, according to the National Interest, millions on Alaskan king crab, lobster tails, ribeye steak, and $1.8 million on musical instruments. So what we have is this: a Secretary of Defense who could not name a single ASEAN nation at his confirmation hearing, who is now firing generals in the middle of a war with no explanation, who proposed cutting tens of billions from the military budget while the Pentagon was simultaneously running one of its biggest spending surges in recent memory. Does this sound like someone who has, as Senator Duckworth said, the breadth and depth of knowledge that a Secretary of Defense needs? And there is one more thing people are not talking about enough. When Trump acknowledged American casualties in this war, he said, and this is documented, that's the way it is. Then he moved on and talked about the renovation of the White House ballroom. At the same time, a viral movement emerged online. The hashtag #SendBarron began trending across the United States. According to Newsweek, Euronews, and multiple other outlets, the campaign pointed to a simple, uncomfortable question. Trump has a 19-year-old son named Barron. He is at the age of military service. The men and women dying in this war are the same age or younger. Former Minnesota Governor Jesse Ventura, a Vietnam veteran, said on Piers Morgan Uncensored, "A war is justified if you are willing to send your kids." Trump himself avoided military service during Vietnam due to a bone-spurred diagnosis. His son has shown no indication of enlisting. His other sons, Don Jr. and Eric, did not serve during Afghanistan or Iraq after 9/11, a time when thousands of young Americans voluntarily signed up. This is not about Barron specifically. This is about a pattern. The people making these decisions are the same people insulated from the consequences. Senator Duckworth held up a copy of the Soldier's Creed during that hearing. She read 2 lines out loud. "I will always place the mission first. I am disciplined, physically and mentally tough, trained and proficient in my warrior tasks." She said our troops follow these words every single day. They pack their rucksacks and go to war. They fly helicopters until their last breath. They man ships and fight fires and do it all. And she asked a simple question: how can we ask warriors to train to the absolute highest standards when we are lowering the standards to confirm a man simply because he is friends with the president? That question did not get answered in January of 2025. And right now, in April of 2026, with 13 Americans dead, 365 wounded, generals being fired mid-war, budget chaos at the Pentagon, and the architect of all of it being a man who could not name a single ASEAN country on his confirmation day, that question is louder than ever. If you think accountability matters, and if you think the people making life and death decisions for our troops should at least be able to pass a basic knowledge test before they get the job, leave a comment below and subscribe for more breakdowns like this.